In this one, I'll be talking about something called Force Alliance Contact and the National Committee for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And I'll be discussing Dan Oke and his affiliations, and be talking about various aspects of the biodigital convergence, especially the blockchain. So this is a follow-up from another video entitled Biodigital Intersection and Militant Insurrection. So with this one, I'm going to be talking about the Brampton courthouse as well, and some incidents that transpired on November the 20th. So I had first gone down there with Josephine LaValle on September the 13th in 2024, and then we had gone on November the 20th, 2024. So upon arriving there, Josephine LaValle and I spotted Derek Noonan outside of the courthouse by himself. So I asked Derek if this was part 2 or 3, because I heard that in October there was a hearing. He said, no, there will be one. That one was today. So I asked if the October one was extended to November. I couldn't make out what Derek Noonan said, but I mentioned that on the Sovereign Soul show they mentioned October 28th and November 22nd, but people are here on November the 20th, and I remember hearing that it was on the 20th. So, just to kind of clarify, just because I'm transcribing what happened there, I got a few dates actually mixed up, and they were talking about William Denby's trial dates. So, the October date and November the 22nd were dates for William Denby, who is a part of something called Kawartha First Nations, which is not a real native reservation, nor is it a real tribe, nor is William Denby actually native. So, and I'll elaborate on that further, and I'll leave links in the description for people to see for themselves, and links to previous videos where I had mentioned William Denby. So, I asked Derek Noonan if William Denby was there, and Noonan said no. And then Josephine said the Kawartha fake First Nations chief isn't here. He was here last time. Are you aware that William Denby is Asmin? Noonan says yes. And so Josephine says, yeah, that's fake native groups that are trying to steal the land. A lot of native people are not happy about that. And then I said, I noticed that there is a common ground between Kellyanne Wolf and Pat King, are distinct members, and she just mentioned William Denby. I might as well ask, are you a member of the Asmin? But Noonan responds saying, no, far from it. So Josephine said, that's good, because people like David Grey Eagle got their windshield smashed and he's been shot at. So we don't want people to get hurt with things they got involved in that they aren't aware of, and even people that were aware of things, they can always redeem themselves. And I said, yeah, and people can make mistakes, right? So Derek Noonan says that he has a phone call to take care of and bails away from us. So the Asmin, Anishinaabe, Salutri, Métis Indigenous Nation, is not a real native nation or tribe, and people purchase a pass. So obviously, you don't have to be native to purchase the pass. And there is some kind of monthly membership of sorts. So the point here is that the Asmin also, they're in support of the biodigital convergence in many aspects, especially the blockchain. See previous videos for that information. And as well, they support UNDRIP, the United Nations Declarations for Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which does not define the word indigenous, but allows for land and resource rights for quote-unquote indigenous people. So, therefore, that in and of itself pretty well becomes a land grab when you factor in that there is no definition for the word indigenous. And also band councils support UNDRIP, which is just great, because there is also native people that support this, which definitely, I don't know what the word is for natives that support fake native groups or even support UNDRIP. So after Josephine and I had went in, obviously nothing was recorded in the courthouse. When we had left the courthouse is when we had started recording, and earlier inside the courthouse, outside of the room where the hearing took place, Dan pointed at me and said F you, and tried telling everyone that I did a hit piece on him. So he actually did swear at me, and I'm sure people can figure out the abbreviations that I'm using, what I'm actually trying to say here. So, Dan Oke, Akwazi LC, Kalen Baylinta, Derek Noonan, Yayoi Takamoto, and others were walking away from the courthouse as I was trying to ask questions. I was trying to ask Dan about his partnerships, Yasmin, William Denby, something called the First Republic Registrar Foundation, nanotechnology, and fake detox remedies that are put onto his website or supported by him through other links left on his website, and the Biodigital Convergence as a whole. I tried to ask about the American military and what the goals are with the courts, considering Dan and also Brad Wozni of the Sovereign Soul Show. Dan Oke and Derek Noonan have both been on the Sovereign Soul Show, and there is some kind of connection to General Jean-Paul Vallée, or former general, I should say. He's former American military, and we'll be diving into him a little bit in this video as well. So, by the time that I had reached Dan in his group, and Dan ended up laughing at me as I was basically talking about various aspects of what he is involved with as I was trying to approach him and ask questions. He laughs, and I said, "You can laugh all you want, man, but I'm just literally facing the truth." And then Dan says to me, "We're on a public space," so Josephine says, "Well, if you want to get technical, it's native land. That's the territory we're on. Mississauga's the new credit." And Dan says, "I don't have a problem with that." I said, "No, but you work with Denby, right? Fake natives." Dan said no and shook his head. And I responded and I say, "You don't work with them? Well, William Denby was here last time, right? You remember the kind of chubby guy that seemed to actually beat Gordon at the door, surprisingly?" Josephine asks, "Well, which native tribe is connected with True North Guardians Alliance and Dan?" So as Dan and his group start to turn away and walk away again, Derek Noonan ended up veering off in a separate direction. I said, "Well, the First Republic Registrar has all these fake quote-unquote indigenous nations," and I don't use the term indigenous because it has to do with UNDRIP, right? And Josephine says, "You have a chance to talk about it, so," and I said, "And you also, Dan, you still have a chance to actually talk to me straight up about all this, and you could easily clear your name if you're not running away, not scared, and actually want to clear things up." So then, in the middle of me saying that, Dan walks up to me fairly fast with Akwazi sort of behind him there, and so when Dan stared at me for about a solid 2 seconds, and I said to Dan, "Go ahead," and Dan says, "Matt," in a frustrated, intense tone. So I told him, "Speak your mind," and he says, "Yes." Or I said, "Yes," and he asks, "Do you have my number?" And I said, "No, I don't have your number." And then he asks, "Do you have my contact?" I said, "I'm sure I could find your number through Fudo Shin, is the name of your dojo, right?" And then Josephine calls him out, says, "You blocked him." And I said, "And you blocked me, so you can easily get a hold of me on Messenger. There are several ways of doing it without a phone number." And Dan says, "If you will respond on Messenger, you and I can have a one-on-one conversation." And Josephine said, "There you go." And I said, "I think that a one-on-one conversation should be entitled for the public to view so that everybody can see, because obviously," and then Dan chimes in to say, "Well, you misuse these platforms and you dig up lies." So I chime in to ask, misuse these platforms and dig up lies. And at that point, we both speaking at the same time, so you can't really distinguish what's said, as Josephine says, "Okay, do a messenger call then." Then you hear the last bit of what Dan says, as you continue to do absolutely nothing of merit or note, and walks away. So, of course, I laughed and read what was on the back of his jacket, which read, "Energize your life." And Josephine says, "You gotta unblock him for that messenger chat." And some lady in their group ended up yelling, "Keep spreading the lies and division." And I responded by saying, "The lies and division sounds like typical freedom nonsense." So, just to clear up a couple things, Brampton is traditionally territory of Mississaugas of New Credit, the Haudenosaunee, and also Wendat. And also, Josephine and I have protected the well in Ancaster, a natural spring, and basically this is so that the locals and also people such as from Six Nations that don't have running water, in my understanding, can actually have a water source. So I don't know what Dan was on about there about me apparently doing nothing of note. He wasn't able to actually address any of the points that I made in my video. So anyway, moving forward, Josephine and I spoke with this lady and this gentleman here. I never caught the lady's name, but the gentleman's name is Mike. So, and they were fairly pleasant as well, might I add. So, Josephine asked, "Did you want to say anything on live about the court case today? Did you guys want to talk about the court case at all today?" And Mike says, "Only that it's all fraud." So Josephine says, "It is. The systems are not built for us." And Mike partially takes off his coat to show his shirt that reads, "What's the difference between ignorance and apathy?" And on the back it says, "I don't know and I don't care." So Josephine and I laughed, and then she says, "We tried to do a live with Dan, but we were told to, well, Matt was told to go F himself. He has a YouTube channel. I don't know if you guys know about it." And I said, "I go by Matt the Unseated," and said to Mike, "I've seen you around before. I know your face. What's your name?" He says Mike, and we shake hands. So Josephine asks him, "Are you Tyrant Patrol?" I couldn't quite make out what he says, but he appeared to nod his head as a yes, and Mike jokingly said, "I've got stab wounds in my back," and showed the back of his shirt again. So, like I said, they were both fairly pleasant and funny. So, and seemed to respond in a respectful manner as well. So, and Josephine asked the court date is remanded to December the 3rd, which the lady confirms and adds that it's at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. So Josephine asks and says they want to sentence him, put him in jail for mailing a letter. And the lady emphasizes mailing letters, as in more than one letter. And Mike chimes in, "Well, don't say him because that's what they're trying to do." Josephine says, "Oh, I see the terminology, yeah." Mike continues and says they're trying to make him the cult leader, and right from the beginning they've been framing him as the cult leader. And when I met with the police over a year ago because of the Save the Children convoy, when I was putting one of the French fries in my mouth close to the end of the plate and he chuckles, the cop says, "Oh, one other thing, you know Dan Oke?" And he laughs. I said, "Oh, classic. I guess his reputation precedes him, I guess." And Mike says they've been trying to nail this whole thing on him from the beginning, and he's a good one for it. So I know there's a whole lot of shit going on, and I know that we're getting closer to the end of things. And I asked them, "How do you feel about, I'm not entirely sure where this whole court case is leading, but how do you feel about bringing in the American military, having the American military court to hold, because, you know, the court can't hold the court accountable," you know what I'm saying? "So how do you feel about the whole premise about having an American military?" And Josephine jokingly asks, "Why can't the courts hold the courts accountable? That's what Trudeau did with the truck convoy. Nothing happened." We knew there was nothing positive about that. So Mike said in 2019 when Trudeau got together with the other two amigos, I know there's a reason that Trump said Article 27 of the USMCA is non-negotiable. So as far as the military coming in, as far as the grand jury summary and the indictment and all that kind of stuff, some other things were actually kind of indistinguishable due to other side chatter there. But Mike continued saying, "I feel great about it. That's not as important as the fact that it's actually happening and going to happen. That's why Article 27 was put in there." I said that I had asked about the American military not only because I had heard something about that through Dan or one of the websites affiliated with him. Josephine asks, "True North Guardians Alliance?" And I said, I think it was the TGB Peace Treaty, Truth Guardians Peace Treaty. That one, I think. I read something about that, and then I've also seen him on, that Sovereign Soul show. Mike says, yep. And I said, they've had that General Paul Vallely and former Air Force General Thomas McInerney. Josephine jokes and says, kind of like Bert and Ernie, and I chuckled. Mike says, you left out Derek Johnson, who's also been there a number of times, and other people as well. The executive orders are all there. It's all spelled out for anybody who wants to take the time to actually look at 11.3 in the Law of War Manual and do all that research and background and all that. So, just to clarify a couple things here. The USMCA, Article 27, that's the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. Article 27 has to do with anti-corruption. And the Law of War Manual, 11.3, is a section entitled End of Occupation and Duration of Geneva Convention Obligations. So, Josephine says, I just want to say something on a side note. You might hear me or Josephine LaValle or Matt Unseated that were not really well liked, and there's things that I won't talk about. Me exposing a groomer and the freedom movement, why I get a lot of backlash from Noonan and Kellyanne Wolf and those people. I just want to say I do support people that protest. I'm Native, of course, we're born into it, right? We know that they want all the land and the resources. What I have, not an issue with, but what we want to document is like admin and the fake Native group, so they are a part of it knowingly, and that's what's on the channel. So that's why Dan told Matt to go F himself, because we exposed that. We're not saying Dan is Asman, but he's associated with that. So when we see people being taken advantage of, people like William Denby, they're not Native. They don't have their ancestral remains, right? So they created Kawartha First Nations, and it's not a real tribe. The only tribes that are there are the Hiawatha Reserve and the Curve Lake Reserve, so we just document it. That's all. We're not here to be aggressive or anything, just document it, and anybody that wants to talk about it, we support when people stand against this. So Mike says, to go along with a peaceful protest, that kind of thing, I'd say in regards to your question about what's going on here, one of the things that's being revealed, I would have to say, is the fact that we're all victims of belligerence, okay? And it's not a big deal. I just want to point out to you that the words matter when you say, I support protests. Because as soon as we victims involve ourselves in the war, then we lose some of what's available to us by means of the Law of War Manual, because we're out here actively engaged in this 5G war of information and other covert and subvert operations. As soon as we go out and we protest, well, are you still just a non-belligerent victim, or are you now engaged in this 5G information war virtue of 5G information by virtue of blah, 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 blah. So, Josephine asks the lady if Mike is her husband and that he's smart like Matt, and she says no. So Mike continues and says, so like I said, you know what? There's tentacles all over the freaking place, and in regards to what you're referring to, and points to Josephine, with the indigenous parties and so on and so forth, yell at him. He was jokingly talking about yelling at Dan, who was in a vehicle driving by, and Josephine said, I was going to say, have a great day, Dan, and I just said, we're better than that, because we don't need to yell at anybody. So Mike then opens up to us and says that Gordon James Berry lived at my house. I said, oh yeah? And Josephine says, I got to meet him finally the last time we were here. I said, he didn't want to talk to us either. Mike says, yeah, I know, and you know what, I drove him all over southern Ontario because I was, like I said, we were doing the Save the Children convoy and all that kind of stuff, and I just this is such a 5D game of chess, as he said. I said, that's one way of putting it. And Josephine says, yeah, that's true. And Mike goes on to say, I said to someone the other day who was giving me shit because I was a Trumper, and I said to the guy, there are two masters sitting on opposite sides of the table, and we're calling this a chess game. Well, when we think about chess, we think about this player on this team is this color, and this player on this team is this color. So I said, you know what's going on right now? The pieces are interchangeable. And for one move, he picks up the player and puts the player over here, this chess piece over here. And you know what? That one is going to pick up the same piece on the next move and put it someplace else, And I said that's the level of things that we're seeing, and because of that, you know what? There's not a hope in hell that I'm gonna know what's going on here. I chime in and say, there is, and let me explain something. So how you mentioned the tentacles, and you talk about the chessboard. I'm gonna throw these two things in there. Instead of the two players on either side, and you talked about the hand or something that's moving the players, it's like a third party or something. Imagine the actual table is held by certain people, whether those certain people are George Soros, the Rockefellers, even smaller things like courthouses and stuff like that, right? What happens is every narrative in history is always controlled on both sides. So if you take World War II, for instance, both sides were funded by Switzerland. So if it wasn't for Switzerland, there would be no war. And what happened at the end of the war? The United Nations was created, which is part of that. You know. And Mike comes in and says, "I know about the Treaty of Versailles. I know shit about the Dulles brothers. Know all that shit." I chimed in, and then the BS of Nuremberg, how it's like you go work for NATO, you go work for CIA and the NASA, right? And Mike says, and the Geneva Convention. So that's interesting that we were talking about certain aspects of World War II or following after World War II and the Geneva Convention was brought up, because Section 11.3 of the Law of War Manual has to do with end of occupation and duration of Geneva Convention obligations. So this Law of War Manual kind of comes into question when it's based around, when it's really just based around a lot of events in history that were set up as part of a narrative and were artificial. So, and also really too, anything that the courts really throw also is put into question with the whole Sestwick KV trust and things of that matter, right? So Josephine then says, you know, what I thought was really weird. So we're all originally part of, like, not the Freedom Convoy, but standing up against tyranny. So a lot of were in Ottawa the first, second, and third weekend. I was there the first weekend, but Kellyanne Wolf was selling Asmund cards for $75. That fake native tribe. She's the ambassador of it, and so Mike says she's been arrested again. You know, I said, oh wow. Josephine said, I think it's 90 something. Yeah, and Mike said, only because I know and I can tell you're fond of her, just like I am. And Josephine said, oh yeah, she hugged me last time, but I don't want to hug her now. And Mike said, it was cocaine possession. And I said, oh yeah, that's something different. Josephine goes, but no, I just wanted to say, so if they've got all these freedom groups, B4F, Canadian Frontline Nurses, Mounties for Freedom, and they say use cash so you don't put us in a digital reality. She's pushing, like, and I chime in to say evolve blockchain. Josephine goes on to say that is why I do these videos, and I cut her off to explain evolve blockchain. So the blockchain is really the backbone of all smart infrastructure, right? And also it's part of, so I lift my sweater and just show the lady and Mike the shirt so they can read it, which happens to be this shirt. It says, have you heard of the Biodigital Convergence? And Josephine mentions that James Scott made those. So I go on to say, so while people go on to focus on things like the United Nations and WEF, which we definitely should, what I'm saying is the main groundwork for the agenda are the standardization organizations. So the ISO, the International Organization for Standardization, the ones who say we should have a red light here, we design the stop signs and stuff like that. They also design the technologies and implementation of said things, right? And then taking this a step further, like what I was saying about all narratives being controlled on both sides, the regime and rebellion are no different. So what do I mean by that is, like, and then Mike goes on, and you got the figure and the white one on the top, and you got the dark one on the bottom. I said, yeah, it's like the term, for lack of better words, white hats and black hats, one and the same thing. And white hat is actually a term for a white hat that's literally given a 33rd degree Freemasons with a double cross on it. Fun fact. So these standardization organizations, they have technical committees which are basically multiple countries sitting in committees working on things. And so in the Blockchain Technical Committee, which is ran by Australia, and the Cybersecurity one, which is ran by Germany, both Israel and Palestine technical committees sit together. So if you're at war, why are you working on cybersecurity with your enemy? You know what I'm saying, right? So Josephine comes in and says, I just want to share one thing with you about the well in Ancaster. You know how they have natural wells everywhere. You go on findaspring.org. You'll see which well is close to you, and Matt and myself were a big part of that to keep it open because they put a fence around it. So when they think about the traditional territory and the treaties, that water shouldn't be locked up and people do a passcode because if they control the water, they charge whatever they want. So we've been fighting for that well and we won, but the Ancaster community, non-natives, Ancaster community have been getting that water forever. And back in the day, if you want to look this up later, people travel the world to get to this spring in Ancaster because there's 3 springs that work together and the sulfur content is a super healer. They don't want us to be well because they're gonna make any money off the pills, right? So they create the sickness, they create the temporary, you don't actually get healed from it. So anyways, we're a big part of it. And then in March, Tom Wilson, who just recently found out that he's Mohawk, he's going to be doing a fundraiser. So he's going to be doing a fundraiser there. So we won the well. So this is pretty big, but the freedom movement doesn't talk about that, right? But that's for everybody because we drink water. Water is life, so I just wanted to share findaspring.org. It's super important. Mike adds in one of the big ones from this area is actually on Mississauga Road. And Mike said, and Josephine says, we'll check it out. And I asked Mississauga Road and what? Mike says Mississauga Road south of Dundas. It's all fenced off. Because I lived in Brampton for 60 years. And so Josephine thanked him and asked if there was access. And Mike says, no, there's no access to it. There's all the health advisory BS up there. They fenced the one off, I'm going to guess, 30 years ago. So, yeah, thanks, Mike, and to the lovely lady over there for the conversation as well. I hope you guys watch this video. So, this idea here, what I want to say is that there's different thumbprints on this document, and there is on another document that I am going to be showing you guys momentarily. So this white flag idea, if you will here, like the Save the Children convoy had this public notice released in David Mackenzie's Trucker magazine, and it mentioned white flags being flown. So the white flag idea was put into David Mackenzie's Trucker magazine with these blood or red ink thumbprints. And this picture was first shown to me in a meeting for what was once a Save the Children convoy, where it was discussed people would be arrested at different locations such as Parliament, Department of Defense, Privy Council, etc. Funny enough, they never mentioned Policy Horizons. And there was also a leak from Vets for Freedom talking about these plans. The leak was fake and all part of the plan because these plans all mirror Marcus Ray and what was talking about in 2022 when he mentioned working with ex-police and ex-military. So basically, there's like a series of dress rehearsals. And so after the truck convoy in Ottawa, Marcus Ray came around. And when Marcus Ray came around and talked about arresting politicians and those responsible, etc., for different, crimes against humanity, he mentioned working with ex-police and ex-military. So Gordon James Barry, who is a friend of Marcus Ray, and also this guy Sean Bradley, otherwise known as Iron Crow. What happens is Sean Bradley was the voice on the Vets for Freedom leak, if you will, and also Marcus Ray's plans did consist of ex-military and ex-police. V4F, or Vets for Freedom, are ex-military. So there you have it. So what I'm saying is this, the V4F leak about the Save the Children convoy was not them actually calling out the Save the Children convoy. It was all part of a bigger plan. And then, of course, following up, you have the Accountability Project and other things. And then now you have Dan Oke here, which is really just kind of a joke, to be honest with you. So, and I also would encourage Dan to do a live with me publicly, because if he has nothing to hide, then he should be able to do that at some point when he has time. And also, as well, the people do have questions about what is going on, for sure, and especially with some of the many points I'll be bringing up about his ties and affiliations and his website, and also in my previous video, there's a lot of unanswered questions. So, anyway, to move forward here, this document, this national security document of sorts, there's all these various news outlets such as the Guardian, CBC, Globe and Mail, and others. So I'm just going to take a drink of water, and then I will read this document without prejudice. The objective: national security, notice of violations and intervention, trusteeship to the Canadian media. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, the members of the National Committee for the Rights of Indigenous People and the Force Alliance Contact, which we'll be looking at later, hereby inform you that the Indigenous and non-Indigenous populations of Canada will soon reclaim control over all socio-economic institutions in the country. So it's interesting, you're using the term Indigenous, like I said about UNDRIP. We remind you that in June 2019 and 2021, Justin Trudeau publicly acknowledged the responsibility of government bodies and the crimes of this over here committed against Indigenous peoples. This acknowledgement, combined with the conclusions of the national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, are key elements as they have helped justify the operations and interventions that will soon follow. It is in accordance with international laws on genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, Executive Order 13848, Executive Order 13818, and Executive Order 13961, that and the Republic for the U.S., that several Canadians and foreign collaborators have united to gather the evidence necessary to justify actions and interventions required to place under trusteeship all Canadian organizations, which, like yourselves, have lamentably failed to protect the most legitimate rights of humanity. And the evidence is gathered and compiled under the banner of the Canadian Indigenous People. Know that our actions have been equally aimed at protecting all Canadian and global populations. One must be complicit or willfully ignorant not to recognize that the many military and political strategies used for centuries to seize the assets and souls of Indigenous peoples worldwide have also been used to victimize global populations. It is in your capacity as representatives that your respective associations that you are now entrusted with the responsibility of sharing this correspondence with all of your respective members. I'm going to leave links in the video, by the way, in the description so that people can look at this article themselves, just because I'm probably not going to read every aspect of it. And then it mentions the National Archives, spanning more than 3 centuries, reveal the political and legal mechanisms that have protected dominant interests while facilitating the elimination of groups deemed obstacles to these objectives. If these mechanisms have allowed global populations and jurists to perpetrate and protect under anonymity 8 periods of this against Indigenous people in Canada, one must either be complicit or willfully ignorant not to acknowledge that these same strategies continue to amplify and perpetuate injustices and violations against populations on a global scale. And so it says that Justin Trudeau's public acknowledgement in which he accepts the conclusions of the National Inquiry Report stating that Canada's political institutions have been and remain for more than 3 centuries responsible for this particular act against quote-unquote Indigenous populations. And so it mentions legal obligations of UN member states. Even though the United Nations is built at Rockefeller Plaza and has nothing to do with serving the interests of humanity, built at the end of World War II. Like I said, and the war was to justify its creation. Both sides were funded by Switzerland. So And then it says that in 2019, several national and foreign collaborators for the National Committee for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Force Alliance Contact have adhered to various national and international regulations to meticulously gather evidence and discreetly inform the military and paramilitary authorities involved in this struggle. As far as I'm concerned about the military, they protect the corresponding corporations, or what you might want to call a country, right? Canada being a corporation registered in the US. The Canadian military serve the interests of the corporation, not the people. So, the addendum submitted strategically on March 7, 2023 to the ICC in this particular case already contained all necessary evidence to justify, in accordance with international law, the prosecution and interventions required to definitively put an end to all these criminalized decision-making structures. So basically what it is it's like holding somebody like Justin Trudeau accountable, criminally speaking, and then essentially making an excuse to have military intervention of sorts in and of itself. This reads like QAnon formula is what it really reads. And so this and they talk about the Great Reset, if you will, and the establishment of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and also it makes mention of these particular things apparently discovered en masse, and the imposition of this particular thing pretty much enforced through lockdowns and that sort of a thing, where privileges and shopping rights and things were taken away from people if they did not take a certain experiment relating to something that starts with the letter C. Sorry for speaking in a very cryptic manner. I'm just doing what I can to have this video remain on YouTube. And Canada is apparently to recognize and punish acts concerning this particular thing, as well as war crimes and crimes against humanity, which is the case that Dan Oke and other people are trying to make, essentially, such as Yayoi Takamoto and Akwazi LC and Kaylin as well. So, use of war measures to conceal and amplify this particular thing, which represents a violation of fundamental principles of international humanitarian law, which prohibits any act of war that causes, harm to civilians, and it says including indigenous populations. The Governor General of Canada failed in her legal obligations, and then it mentions the neglect here. And the Governor General is the national representative of the monarchy in Canada, and then the Lieutenant Governor is the provincial representative of the monarchy, and of course multiple provinces, multiple lieutenant governors. So, and so on and so forth. It mentions the Rome Statute, different articles of it, as well as the International Criminal Court, and also brings up Nuremberg, which, like I said, many people just went on to work for NATO, NASA, and the CIA. I had this conversation with Mike, actually. So it's interesting that we talked about that, as well as a little bit about the Geneva Convention, which is mentioned in the Law of War Manual, section 11.3. Yet these things are just constructs and artificial, and I think were actually put in place by design here. So, and then it mentions oaths of allegiance, and none of these individuals, military, police, government, serve the people. And if you even just take the word govern for a second, to govern is to control or manipulate, and to lead is to actually set an example. So there's a very big difference in those words. And then it mentions different healthcare professionals intimidated in Canada, as it says here. and then it mentions Canadian lawyers that were intimidated, and goes on to mention people like Rocco Galati, for instance, and I've mentioned him in a few different videos. So, and then as well, it mentions 700 doctors from the province of Quebec that basically encountered, we'll say, hardships as a result of this particular thing here, which of course is really just a large psychological operation. Really, the whole big picture is the biodigital convergence, or what some would call transhumanism. The idea of this thing that starts with the letter P here is just a small sliver of that. And so just to kind of skip ahead here, and like I said, people can feel free to read the entire document, as I will leave a link for it that'll show this PDF in video form so they can scroll through it. And so, sorry, I'm just scrolling through here. It also mentions terms like deep state, which we see in QAnon related types of things. And of course, all the signatory members of the National Committee for Rights of Indigenous Peoples includes this Normand Pilot, Melanie Persault, Steve Trudel, Paul Perlin, and and then some of the independent collaborators, and we'll be looking at all these people in this video. Major General Paul Vallalti, a retired U.S. Army general, and also Richard Bradley Wozni, who runs the Sovereign Soul Show, and then the self-identified governor of Vermont, Kevin Hoyt, and then the Lakeshore Sovereign Assembly True North Guardians Alliance. You have Dan Warren Oke and Yayoi Takamoto, and then you have Norman Traversy here. So, and then of course other parties addressed here are BRICS nations, Donald Trump, the Space Force, the International Criminal Court, UN Human Rights Council, Judge of the Supreme Court of Canada, Secretary General of NATO, Amnesty International, Brenda Lucky, and various other entities and politicians and international based entities and that sort of a thing. People can look at this document themselves if they so desire. So when Marcus Ray came around in 2022, and when the Save the Children convoy came to be, and those plans surfaced that were supposedly leaked by V4F, like I said, it was a dress rehearsal. And then when you factor in things like the Accountability Project, and then now you have Dan with others trying to bring in a military tribunal, which all revolves around the theme of accountability. You have people suited up for a white hat intervention and a means to try and change the system. And this is where the biodigital convergence comes into play through things such as Evolved Blockchain, which Kellyanne Wolf is the face of, which pretty much is direct democracy in the form of blockchain, pretty much. So then in this Sovereign Soul Show here, Norman Traversy mentions being contacted by First Nations Chief William Denby, does not call him out as fake. Dan confirms that Denby was in the courthouse on September the 13th, which I'll leave that live stream as well for people to see. When serving, so Dan confirms that Denby was in the courthouse on September 13th when serving indictment. And according to Norman, Denby is taking 71 top public servants to court, and he names Justin Trudeau, Chrystia Freeland, and others. And Dan mentions Jack having given his document to Chief Denby and thumb drives from Norman Traversy. So Norman Traversy mentions two scheduled court dates for Denby being October 28th and November 22nd. So that's where that small mix-up occurred, if you remember at the beginning of this. And his evidence such as his quo warrantos, his letter to the Norman's quo warrantos, Norman's letter to the Judge Advocate General in Canada and to the one in the U.S., and Norman's letter to Trump. So then I just want to say some of the resources on the True North Guardians Alliance website. Some of this will be repetition from previous videos, but you have the common law courts, the First Republic Registrar, which is really ran through the Rothschild family, Mythos Canada, Heart Plan Vision, Stand Up Canada, and World Doctors Alliance. So we never looked at Heart Plan Vision, so we'll be looking at that in this video. So I'm going to just go right here to the About page of Heart Plan Vision. So it brings up something called nanosoma, which we'll be getting to once this loads here. But basically, this Heart Plan Vision is like something where they try to sell the illusion of something natural that really couldn't be further from the truth. And so the bio for the founder is Shema Satya, third generation San Franciscan for many years, delighted in living in Marin County, California at the foot of Mount Template. Frequent walks at a nearby lake kept her grounded in the mystic path and helped to balance out her 3 decades of passionate research into discovering the key elements essential for humanity's passage through fear and the addiction to power into an awakened state where love is the guiding light for our choices and actions. The bridge for this is through the Sacred Heart, Heart to Heart. Shema's first literary contribution is a journey into the everyday thoughts and conversations that are currently underway as we, as global citizens, seek wisdom and right action in this time of the Great Transition. It is the forerunner to Shema's larger body of work under development now, Heart Plan Vision Portal. These materials are in publication process currently. She comes into her activism and consciousness work through the path of being a performing artist in her earlier years, immersed in the world of dance and trained in a blend of jazz, African hip-hop, modern, and ballet. She spent 3 decades training and performing in local community shows in the San Francisco Bay Area, and towards the end of the artistic focus, she shifted her attention to an in-depth study of environmental issues, which soon led to broader research into the full spectrum of global issues of our time. Her final dance performance piece was a solo performance to the spoken word about a whale and environmental issues. It was a lovely way to transition from her life as a performance artist into a life of heart-based activism. And then it mentions a new world for the greatest of all good, and as well goes on to basically mention something called nanosoma, which I'll be showing here. So, nanosoma, many drugs target individual actions of a specific this or bacteria. However, development and application of a broad spectrum compound which targets the whole immune response would allow one therapy to have a global application for human disease. And Dr. Raghavan, the CEO of NanoRx Inc., has invented one such dietary supplement, Metacol, or nanosoma, which is thought to activate via vitamin D receptors to influence the immune system. So, something that's supposed to be something natural is made by somebody who runs a nanotechnology company. Sounds real convincing, right? So, I'm going to read a little bit about the contributors to this program. I'll just name off a couple things. So, the most distinct names here are David Icke, who seems to be a gatekeeper of Jesuits, from my understanding, and also, as he just talks about Sabbatai and Francus and doesn't mention that they got their theological arguments from the Jesuits. And then you have Barbara Marx Hubbard, who ran this thing called the Foundation for Conscious Evolution, which is bankrolled by the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. And Barbara Marx Hubbard has since passed away, but the organization still lives on and pretty much is like an organization where they talk about mysticism and things like this, but their way of achieving a form of enlightenment or the Christ consciousness or the noosphere, however you want to put it, is transhumanism. So through nanotechnology, pretty much. So now to actually go talk about nanosoma a little bit. So the product, if you will, I'm just going to look at the ingredients for a sec, which will eventually load, but its ingredients include water, polycosanol, sucrose monolaurate, vitamin E TPGS, and potassium sorbate and citric acid. So I'm going to go over the vitamin E TPGS and what that is. So vitamin E TPGS as a molecular biomaterial for drug delivery. So the TPGS stands for tocopherol polyethylene glycol succinate, and it's a water-soluble derivative of natural vitamin E, which is formed by esterification of vitamin E succination and sorry about that. Vitamin E by sorry, excuse me. Let me just start over here. It's a water-soluble derivative of vitamin E, which is formed by esterification of vitamin E succinate with polyethylene glycol. As such, it has advantages of polyethylene glycol and vitamin E in application of various nanocarriers for drug delivery. So to package part of a supplement or vitamin into a nanocarrier, so a piece of nanotechnology to deliver this, right? Including extending the half-life of the drug in plasma and enhancing the cellular uptake of the drug. TPGS has an amphiphilic structure of lipophilic, alkyl tail, and hydrophilic polar head with hydrophile lipophile balance. Value of 13.2 and a relatively low critical in micelle concentration of 0.02% WW, which make it to be an ideal molecular biomaterial in developing various drug delivery systems, including prodrugs, micelles, liposomes, and nanoparticles, which would be able to realize sustained, controlled, and targeted drug delivery, as well as to overcome multi-drug resistance and to promote oral drug delivery as an inhibitor of P-glycoprotein. In this review, and so on and so forth. So basically, this is a drug delivery system, the vitamin E TPGS. So it's a drug delivery system through a nanocarrier is what it is in short. So just going to look at a couple of these patents here that were patented by the same doctor that created the nanosoma product. So polycosanol nanoparticles, the present invention provides nanoparticulate polycosanol formulations, including these particles, as well as methods of using the particles and formulations for treatment and prophylaxis of various diseases and conditions. So people can look at the diagrams themselves to get a more intimate understanding of this product. But the point is that this guy is heavily involved in the convergence, and Dan is suggesting resources for people that are just part of the biodigital convergence in a different way than the inoculation for that thing that starts with the letter C that was never isolated properly. So, and that thing that inoculation is a product of synthetic biology, meaning they just 3D bioprinted it a bunch. So then you have Medidical, which is liquid and gel nanoparticle formulations. The present invention provides methods of regulating physiological and metabolic parameters and of treating diseases by administering this to a subject in need of such regulation and or treatment, and it can be administered as a liquid or gel formulation. So just to look at that particular scientist's resume a little bit here, it essentially will say here as it loads, once again, this is what happens when you have a lot of tabs open. So he deals in applications of nanoemulsions in chronic and infectious diseases and stem cell research and gene expression studies, more like gene manipulation. And he has several publications for people to look at. He's this guy right here. He is the CEO of NanoRx Inc., a privately held company founded in 2008 with a PhD in organic chemistry from Oregon State University and an MS in chemistry from IIT Mumbai, India. And he worked on drug discovery for over 25 years at Columbia University, Max Planck Institute, Germany, this one, which is now Novartis, and Boehringer Ingelheim, which is a German pharmaceutical company. He has over 35 U.S. and international patents, and then a LinkedIn account. So he's worked in pharma on research consulting and biodiesel research, in drug metabolism and radioactive synthesis of drugs and such. And then also as well, has worked for Boehringer, as said, was at the New York University and was a researcher at Ranbaxy Labs, a Max Planck Institute, and of course, has his own organization, NanoRx Inc. So there we have it, a scientist no different than any of the people working on the convergence experiment in and of itself. So it says here that this is from the Policy Horizons website, which is ran by someone named Crystal Vander Elst. Policy Horizons was created by the Privy Council of Canada, and this is pretty much the face of the biodigital convergence in Canada. So it says that the biodigital convergence could accelerate the development of technologies that raise human abilities above the norm, whether via drugs, nutritional supplements, prosthetics, or neurotechnologies. Uneven access to expensive technologies could further compound economic inequality. And I just want to say on a side note about neurotechnologies, Dr. David Martin, who is promoted by Dan Oke, as well as Gordon James Berry, has worked on different neurotechnologies of sorts. So, and this right here, this website is promoting the convergence experiment through various means, such as it even mentions nutritional supplements. I wouldn't really call them nutritional, but supplements are involved, and the holistic side is just as involved as the petroleum-based medicine side of things, or conventional medicine, if you really want to call it that. So then this aspect of his website, which I went over in the previous video that I mentioned, where I mentioned Dan, it talks about supportive and regenerative technologies here, and then also goes on to mention things like ascended masters and spirit guardians, light warriors, angels, and then also the pillar of white light and the violet flame. So these are all things that pretty much revolve around the new age, and pretty much taking different entities and using them to your will, and these entities being things like Nikos or Adama or Metatron and that sort of a thing. So Gnosticism and the New Age pretty much play into this convergence experiment as well. So we're going to go over that as well. I don't really want to read the Palladian protection to you guys. You can do this yourself if you want. So I want to say that the New Age pretty much comes from the Theosophical Society, Theosophists, and the Rosicrucians are classified as a theosophical group, but the founder of the Theosophical Society, her name is Helena Blavatsky, and she largely inspired Alice Bailey, who started what's called the Lucis Trust, which is part of the United Nations, and they hold consultative status at the Economic and Social Council of the United Nations, and the World Goodwill is recognized by the Department of Global Communications at the UN as an NGO. So Alice Bailey, who is now passed away, was also part of the convergence experiment in and of itself, along with Helena Blavatsky, as she paved the way for people involved in the New Age and Gnosticism and different elements of mysticism and the Kabbalah and such to be involved. And while these people speak in a mystic and occultic language, it is no different than technocrats like Crystal Vander Elst of Policy Horizons. They might use different words or different ideas, but they all convey the same thing, which is transhumanism, better known as the biodigital convergence. So it says here that Hubbard, so it's talking about Barbara Marx Hubbard, who is also a contributor to the Heart Plan vision. Hubbard's vision of trans evolution through a super organic cyber nervous system was inspired by the tech-gnostic prophecies of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin and the design science revolution of R. Buckminster Fuller. Teilhard de Chardin was a eugenicist Jesuit priest who preached a trans-gnostic gospel of spiritual or noetic evolution through the awakening of universal consciousness through the noosphere. Fuller was an eminent futurist and the godfather of the design science revolution, which prototyped synergetic models of evolutionary architecture such as the geodesic dome, and both Teilhard de Chardin and Fuller professed their faith in the cosmic Christ consciousness or noospheric evolution, which Hubbard likewise idolizes the crux of humankind's cybernetic evolution into a trans-technological collective. During Hubbard's 2015 speech to members of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, she traced the awakening of her own conscious evolution to her reading of Teilhard de Chardin's Phenomenon of Man. The minute I read that, I dedicated myself to the noosphere, derived from the pre-Socratic philosopher Anaxagoras. Anaxagoras' concept of the nous, which is the omnipresent mind of the cosmos. The noosphere is, according to Teilhard de Chardin, the tangential energy of the universe that is evolving through human consciousness. In Hubbard's speech at the 2015 IONS International Conference, she pontificated how, through the tangential energies of noetic evolution, the planet has grown a new nervous system in the last 15 years, and its internet, its Facebook, its Twitter, its 7 billion cell phones and counting, an enormous nervous system has been given, and it's open to us. So, and it also says, in brief, Hubbard believed that the noospheric expansion of consciousness is evolving the human biological nervous system into an extended technological network of smartphones that are interlinked with the internet social media by ostensibly branching human nervous systems collectively out through mobile phones, across satellite telecommunications, across social networks are, according to Hubbard, building evolutionary stepping stones toward a transhuman zenith in which brain-computer interfaces and nanotech implants will unite human consciousness with the cosmic consciousness of the noosphere by merging organic biological intelligence with high-tech artificial intelligence. So, trying to blur the lines between what is biological and what is digital. So, now we reach the First Republic Registrar. So, it acknowledged this First Republic Registrar, which is part of Dan's suggestions. Dan and Yayoi Takamoto are directly involved in the First Republic Registrar Foundation, which is ran through the Rothschilds Bauer Foundation. We'll be getting to that. So it says First Republic Registrar Foundation is a sovereign intergovernmental organization with Eagle Eye Ministries and a private records archive under soil and land jurisdiction in accordance with natural and international customary law. So, and then it goes on to mention that they work in partnership with the Sovereign International Court of Justice and the Sovereign International Criminal Court with the following seals assigned. I'll show that if I can. And when this was enacted as the official registrar, that's when the seals were assigned. And it works in partnership with several solidarities, meaning people who have come together in groups to focus on various missions that aim to become beacons of hope in a time of change and transformation, and are also working towards establishing Gold Age communities with all the amenities and necessities required for fully functioning independent states. So, and the slogan that they have is working with and not against. And that is the person that made this slogan is Dr. Lord Grantham Taylor Hughes of the Bauer Foundation. And it says there simply means that the foundation works peacefully with all good sovereign governments and people worldwide. So sovereign and government is an oxymoron, but whatever. We take the simple stance of working with everyone for progress, albeit we are all aware of unconscionable financial greed. Here at the First Republic Registrar Foundation, we are not trying to identify the culprits. Instead, we focus attention on our inherent birthright to sovereignty and the phenomenal progress that collectively we can all achieve. So, identifying culprits is actually a very big part of dealing with the major issue at hand. So, calling them gatekeepers would actually be a little bit too soft, because they are directly involved with quote-unquote indigenous nations, if you will. And the reason why, the term indigenous does revolve around UNDRIP, like I was saying. They also support UNDRIP, and also they have different quote-unquote indigenous nations that are supported on this website from people from different organizations such as Liberland, which is, I think, between Serbia and Croatia, and then Wurtland, which is an internet-only indigenous nation. I don't know exactly how that works, but maybe that's for another video to discuss some of these other indigenous nations. So I'll just show some of them. And so you have this Talismanic Kingdom of Atmarium, Dynastic Order of St. Mariam, United of Atlantis Worldwide, whatever, and Wurtland, Asgardia, the Space Nation, etc., etc. So, and then here is what's interesting, is some of the registrar listings. You have Dan Oke here, who is an official member of the First Republic Registrar Foundation, is actually what they call an Aboriginal Indigenous International Citizen domiciled on the land of Canada. And he's a certified sovereign as Lord Daniel Warren Oke. Nothing sovereign about this whatsoever. And also, as well, just to show you that with Yayoi Takamoto here, the same thing is exactly established right here. This husband and wife right here are Aboriginal Indigenous International Citizens domiciled on the land of Canada. So, there you have it. Pretendians in action. So, the portion here that I will show you here is Dan Oke. This is his sensei, Sensei Plat Fudoshin, the name of his dojo, falls under the branch of CMAC. And then also his students, which are Akwazi Elsie, he was the guy that followed behind. And then, of course, you have Kalen as well, so they are also part of this First Republic registrar, and I will just say as well that it's not too late to actually turn things around if you so desire. However, the fact of the matter is that Aquazi and Kalen are accomplices in what Dan Oke is doing, even though their names are not on that Force Alliance contact document or whatever that is, right? So it's not too late to turn things around. I was going to read their LinkedIn pages, but unfortunately things have turned around a little bit here because technology fails once again. I'll do what I can to try get these people up here. So all in all, I just want to say too that these two people, Kalen and Aquazi, are students of Dan Oke, and ultimately it's up to you two if you want to continue down this road, but it won't lead anywhere positive, that's for sure. And also you guys are part and part responsible for the Biodigital Convergence, and I would hope that you two as well watch this video, and perhaps when we next meet, if you have questions for me, feel free, or even message me directly through Facebook. So, Kaylin is has a goal of becoming a nurse, according to this. I'm not sure if she is presently a nurse. And, of course, had experience working at Oakville Gymnastics Club, and was a child care provider, hostess at Milestones, and a co-op student at Oakville Trafalgar Hospital. So, there you have all of that. And then you have Aquazi, who is a fitness and wellness coach, and all I have to say is be careful about the supplements you recommend, because the supplements are also involved in the convergence as well. That's just what I'll say to you, Aquazi. So, I'll read about the blockchain in a little bit, but first I want to just go over just a couple things here. So this is Steve Lesperance. These are some screenshots taken from when Josephine and I went to the Brampton courthouse on September the 13th. So there's Steve Lesperance, and I'm not sure what this guy's name is here. And then, of course, you have William Denby. So Steve Lesperance is from Kawartha First Nations, and he's known as the Deputy Chief. And then you have William Denby here, who's apparently the Chief of Kawartha First Nations, and he is working with Kellyanne Wolf, who is also part of the ASMAN. And the YouTube channel that they have is We the People Press Canada, and he shares the link, and actually, what's his face? William Denby has shared the link, Ask It for Equity, which is the link to sign up for the ASMAN. So, and then there was also, as well, a public notice by the Williams Treaties First Nations warning people of Denby, who was falsely presenting himself as Native. So I read that in my prior video. So, and then this, besides there's Kawartha First Nation that I happen to be blocking. Sorry about that. Basically, all of these things are what we'll call the Kawartha network. So, with this Kawartha network here, you have like a network of fakery, and there was a deputation that was done by William Denby where he mentions he reviewed the budget and mentions tribute homes where they had to move 100 loads an hour on the highway, and they do on Country Lane to Braun Peel's gravel pit. He says he informed them that they're moving quote-unquote, our ancestral remains. So he asked for $500 million in damages. And he also claims that 15 of his band council members, who are all First Nations, and 7 non-First Nation members that have been acknowledged in international courts, quote-unquote, that we do own Kawartha Lakes. So, basically, not that the city or local politicians are any better, they're all involved in the circular economy and things of this nature. However, the fact of the matter is that he is using a fake ancestry of sorts to try cop money, and also the deputation was done through Kickley, which is Maggie Braun's initiative. It's a play on words from a local Agenda 21 initiative called ICLEI. So I just want to say that the First Republic Registrar also promote using the blockchain. So I'm going to get to the blockchain in a second. It says blockchain is a secure way for people to own and control their digital footprint, the data they create living through devices and wearable, implantable, ingestible technology in smart environments. In essence, it is a digital ledger that keeps track of everything across a decentralized computer network that is said to be permanent and secure. Picture a real-time account book that keeps track not only of your monetary assets, Bitcoin, this is how folks understand blockchain, but also civil records like birth certificates, marriage certificates, and court proceedings, voting records, property ownership certifications, and education credentials, health information including DNA, bioinformatics, and data from wearable technologies, public benefit access like food stamps, now even one's movements, geolocation data, and social interactions via QR code, health, passports, and contact tracing. So it says, whether we know it or not, when we agree to have our lives linked to blockchain, we are agreeing to live in a behaviorist panopticon in exchange for convenience and limited privileges. We give up our free will. The future being handed to us is one that will be shaped by surveillance, AI, predictive analytics, machine learning, and feedback loops. We risk swapping our vibrant human spirits, beautiful in their passionate creativity and flawed vulnerability, for sanitized digital twins that will be managed as human capital by callous technocrats to profit social impact investors. Before we walk through the door of digital identity, realize it opens onto a maze designed to disorient, confuse, and control us. So, and then goes on to say here, so this is written by Alison McDowell, who is quite knowledgeable on the convergence experiment herself. So it says we need for people to understand blockchain transcripts are one part of a larger agenda tied to a global economic reboot. A goal of the World Economic Forum is to create a literal Internet of Bodies using 5G and 6G and smart city Internet of Things sensors, whether people are linked to blockchain via these biometric health passports or education transcripts, the result will be the same. We are crossing the threshold not just into surveillance capitalism, but into full-on biocapitalism. Our bodies mine for data that will run massive future markets. In human capital, they need blockchain identity, and they need it brought to scale. However, until that happens, there is still time to change course and fight for humane economic system that respects all children of the earth and future generations. So, yeah, I very much do like not only the optimism, but also the effort in dealing with this agenda and bringing it out, because these people like WEF, UN, and even the standardization organizations are truly afraid of people being organized and educated and really just simply saying no. And it's not to use Chris Sky's stupid just say no slogan or whatever. It takes a little more than that. But once you're educated and understand the goal, nobody's going to want this technology, and everybody, and what is relied upon is consent and people endorsing, wearable technologies and things like this. So once we're educated and know what's going on, then we can truly take a stand. And also, most importantly, we should be protecting our water, and you can find natural springs through findaspring.org in the meantime. So, thank you, Allison McDowell, and thank you, James Scott, for everything you do. So, blockchain will not empower the people, it will turn them into digital commodities secured on ledgers. The plan is for us to be scored, sifted, and sorted in a brutish program of fierce competition and precariousness. Make no mistake, the oligarchs value the reliability of robots over the cunning of humans. Universal basic income and digital vouchers for education, housing, and healthcare are poison apples, not solutions meant to help the masses. Blockchain is a deception. If we take the bait, we'll end up playable characters in an augmented reality game of life cooked up by the CIA and defense contractors to benefit hedge funds. So don't fall for it. Yeah. Agreed. Well worded. Solid article. So, now to go on and just speak about some of the other names that are listed on that document with thumbprints. So, we're going to start off by talking about General Paul Vallely, and it mentions here that the Stand Up America project was founded in 2005 by Paul Vallely, and it also goes on to mention some of his education here and things. I did read about it in my prior video. So he's done 2 combat tours in Vietnam and also participated in psychological operations, civil military operations, and special operations in various countries. And he served as a consultant to Commanding General of the Special Operations Command, as well as Department of Defense, or DoD, anti-drug and counterterrorism task forces. He also designed and developed the host nation support program in the Pacific for the DoD and the State Department. So, and then it goes on to basically say that this Stand Up America U.S. project was founded by Paul Vallely, who is retired from the U.S. Army and is a public policy research organization formed and existing for the purpose of promoting discussion and principles found in the U.S. Constitution and Declaration of Independence, and application of these principles to present public policy issues. So, and then it says that they're a network of patriotic Americans from all walks of life, including former members of the military, federal, state, and local employees of government, analysts, writers, world leaders, and the group extends across the globe, as it says. And they have briefed the FBI, Congress, law enforcement, and various other agencies. And then it goes on to mention more things here that they support, and to just comment on the safe and secure Israel side there. I just want to say I don't take any sides between Israel and Palestine, but I have a few videos, and also people can check out my live streams on Facebook at Matt Unseated and even Josephine LaValle's, and you will see that basically the Palestine and Israel standardization organizations sit in technical committees that have to do with the blockchain and then with cybersecurity. So if you're supposedly at war with one another, why are you working on cybersecurity together? That really makes no sense. And the Balfour Declaration for Israel basically being thrown in because of the Rothschilds. Then you have the Rockefeller Foundation, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, that support boycott, divestment, sanctions, which are activists for the Palestine movement. And then, of course, you have the Tides Foundation in there as well. And the Tides Foundation is #1 founder Ford Foundation, Number 2 is different George Soros organizations. And number 3, different Rockefeller organizations. So, and the United Nations main headquarters sits in New York City, Rockefeller Plaza. So there you have it. So, who really benefits when the Rothschilds and Rockefellers are pretty much playing a chess game with each other, so to speak, right? Anyway, that whole conflict is done by design. I spoke in a previous video where I mentioned Albert Pike, a Confederate general who also was one of the founders of the KKK. He said that a third world war would erupt between Jews and Arabs. So there you have it. That whole situation was put into play by design. And there's also a big difference between Jewish people and Zionists, because a Zionist is one who believes in the formation of a Jewish country or Jewish state. So there you have that little difference. Anyway, I've said enough about Israel and Palestine for now. So this basically is like a public policy type of institution that is ran through Paul Vallely, who, like I said, has partaken in psychological operations and such like that. He's also the founder of Nemo Arms Inc. in Idaho, and of course he's the chairman of the Stand Up America U.S. Foundation. He also chairs the Legacy National Security Advisory Group, and he's a founding member of the Citizens Commission on National Security. So there you have it. So of course he is in support of Donald Trump, and we will get to talking about the National Nanotechnology Initiative eventually. I just want to say also as well, in relation to Donald Trump, Operation Warp Speed, he bragged about pushing out the experimental inoculation in reference to that thing that starts with the letter C and ends with the number 19. So, Nemo Arms Inc., a defense company that supports constitutional and God-given rights and provides products made in the USA. So there you have an organization that pretty much manufactures technology and weapons. So then you have the legacy group of the Stand Up America Foundation, which here basically, I'm just going to find my place ever so briefly here. It says here that, so this Legacy National Security Advisory Group, it says here that it was created by Paul Vallely and is populated by former military command and flag staff, special operations leadership, seasoned intelligence community leaders, former law enforcement, cultural and diplomatic experts, and a network of what is described as HUMINT that spans across the globe. I'm not sure what exactly that stands for. If somebody wants to leave that in the comments, that would be great. Thanks very much. And so it goes on to mention more about his resume here. He was actually a senior on-air military strategist for Fox News for 7 years. Fox News is the right, CNN is the left. So, two wings of the same bird with the media, and media was also a Greek sorceress who cast illusions, fun fact. So, and of course, he has there's a large network of contacts, including with the CIA, the DoD, the NSA, FBI, foreign intelligence agencies, etc. So, obviously they work quite directly with the intelligence community. And then, now to look at the Citizens Commission on National Security, ever so briefly here. It says the commission will be focusing on our government's policies and holding our elected officials and their appointed personnel accountable in the public arena for the policies they develop and implement. And then it says the members are basically have experience in military, intelligence, diplomacy, media, etc. So then I'm just going to very briefly read about the executive director here, which is Roger Aronoff. He is a former editor of Accuracy and Media. He's worked as a journalist, TV producer, writer, and distributor, and he has documentaries that include Confronting Iraq, Conflict and Hope, Clinton Legacy, and TWA 800, The Search for Truth. Two of those films, Confronting Iraq and TWA 800, have won top prizes at World Fest Houston International Film Festival, and he's been a guest commentator on CNN, Fox News, Air Canada, CNBC's Kudlow and Company, Russia Today, CTV, etc. So he graduated from University of Texas and is a freelance journalist in South Africa, a columnist for the Jewish Herald Voice, and is a producer of syndicated radio and TV musical variety programs, including Woodstock, 10 Years Later, Billboard's Artist of the Year, No Place But Texas, and Revismo. And he wrote and produced a monthly 60-minute style TV series called Public Disclosure, and of course co-wrote another documentary here, and so on and so forth. So has a big background in journalism, TV, writer, etc. So, and I also just want to say too that two of the members of the Citizens Commission on National Security happen to be General Paul Vallely and also someone named Thomas McInerney, which is a former Air Force Lieutenant General. I mentioned him in my previous video. So he also works in this organization here. So now just to get on with speaking about the National Nanotechnology Initiative here, what happens here is it says it's been a driving force for the scientific community working on nanomaterials in the U.S. and inspiration for the launch of nanotechnology programs elsewhere. Following a report on the Intelligence Working Group on Nanotechnology presented in September 1999, President Clinton launched the NNI in a speech at the California Institute of Technology on January 21, 2000, and on December 2003, the NNI became law through the so-called 21st Century Nanotechnology Research and Development Act, which was signed by President Bush. 2 points to the law that are worth noting were the establishment of the National Nanotechnology Coordination Office with the aim of acting as a point of contact between the federal agencies participating in the initiative, as well as between researchers funded by such agencies and the public, and the setting up of external reviews to both assess and shape the activities of the NNI. So, and then it's been acting as a tool to bring together scientists with different backgrounds through working at the nanoscale. Coordination has also resulted in the establishment of new nano-specialized experimental infrastructure and the optimized use of that already existing, and the activities of the NNI have translated into the creation of excellence networks and centers in the U.S., such as the National Nano Manufacturing Network, Center for Sustainable Nanotechnology, and the National Nanotechnology Coordination Infrastructure, and Nanosystems Engineering Research Center for Nanotechnology-Enabled Water Treatment. That's where gold and silver silica nanomaterials come into play for absorbing pollutants, if you will. However, you still ingest the nanotechnology or bathe in it. So either way, it's the problem reaction solution scenario. Gold and silver silica nanomaterials are endorsed by the United Nations. So noteworthy are also the promotion of environmental health and safety studies as outlined by Lisa Friedersdorf and colleagues in their comment, and the extensive efforts on education and outreach by NNCO. So, during the past 15 years, the NNI has evolved in shape and grown in size. The number of agencies participating in the initiative has grown from 5 to 33, and the NNI has received strong support from both Democratic and Republican administrations, with over $1.4 billion US in the president's budget request for 2020. So there you have it. Both the Democrats and Republicans are involved in the convergence experiment in itself. So just going to show here very briefly is this guy who goes by the name Mike Rocco, who has an extensive resume and he basically runs the NNI, which I was just reading about. He has a PhD, National Science Foundation and National Nanotechnology Initiative. He's Senior Advisor for Science and Engineering at the National Science Foundation and founding chair of the U.S. National Science and Technologies Council's Subcommittee on Nanoscale Science, Engineering, and Technology. Prior to joining National Science Foundation, he was Professor of Mechanical and Chemical Engineering. Dr. Rocco is credited with 13 inventions, contributed over 200 articles and 20 books. He proposed the National Nanotechnology Initiative on March 11, 1999 at the White House and is key architect of the NNI. Dr. Rocco is correspondent member of the Swiss Academy of Engineering Sciences, honorary member of the Romanian Academy, and fellow of the ASME. I can't remember what the acronym stands for, but it's an American standardization organization. Internet of Physics and AICHE. Dr. Rocco is editor-in-chief for the Journal of Nanoparticle Research. He was awarded the National Materials Advancement Award in 2007 as the individual most responsible for support and investment in nanotechnology by government, industry, and academia worldwide, and received the IUMRS Global Leadership and Service Award at the European Union Parliament in 2015 for vision and dedicated leadership that has made major impact to all citizens around the world. Right. So that's who runs the National Nanotechnology Initiative. I'm going to just take another drink of water and then I will move forward. So we have Kevin Hoyt up next here. So here's some pictures of Kevin Hoyt. It says here that he's a TV producer, director, chief editor, host, outdoor personality at Pursuit Channel. We deliver the outdoors. They deal with a lot like hunting and fishing and stuff like that. And so then he is also he was a political candidate in Vermont. So in Vermont State. So then to look at this, there were warrants put out for his arrest. So he was a Republican nominee for state representative in 2018, independent candidate for state senator in 2020, and was arrested on outstanding warrants after a tip led authorities to his location in Fairhaven on the 4th of July. So after this anonymous tip, there were warrants stemming from 3 cases on intentionally violating on abuse prevention stalking order between June and November 2022. So this guy, Kevin Hoyt, is one of the people that was on that document that I showed. And he allegedly violated the stalking order that was put in place, and he was ordered to have no contact with former state rep Christopher Bates of Bennington. And so then at the beginning of the hearing, they allowed him to serve as his own attorney in 3 cases. Then when Hoyt went off to the races, informing the judge that he was also requesting a change of venue into a federal court, asking for federal protection, that he would not participate in what he called a fictional corporate entity. He said this is 100% political and retaliatory, is what Hoyt told the judge. And he said, I'm a 2024 candidate for governor. They just cut my brake lines. They want to kill me. And so the judge reminded him that they're there for one purpose, and that is to conduct arraignment, and so on and so forth. Sounded like it was basically a difficult trial. And so he mentions that there were those accused of so he can't verbally say the name of that judge or whatever, can't report felony gun crimes, and talks about other crimes to report here as well, and so on and so forth. So, like I said, links will be found in the description so people can read about Kevin Hoyt if they so desire. And this right here is basically between a Republican, a Democrat, or conservative and liberal for the Canadians watching, and then of course Kevin Hoyt. So basically, when each of the people are asked different questions, and they pretty much, the left-leaning Democrat and the right-leaning conservative, give their prospective answers within their, wing of the bird. And Kevin Hoyt basically mentions different aspects such as quote-unquote chemtrails, which basically he gets labeled as a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist. So he's like the Alex Jones type of candidate, if you will. And so this is all done by design, where he specifically chooses the third answer that goes far out to left field, so to speak, in comparison to these people. And it's not to say that there are certain ounces of truth in what he's saying, but for instance, using terms like chemtrails, people's brains just shut down. He doesn't talk about graphene nanoparticles sprayed into the air for the purpose of twinning the environment into the metaverse, as well as human beings and all biological matter and life for that matter. So he doesn't quite accurately explain things, to say the least. And like I said, this is all done by design, so you have the quote-unquote tinfoil hat guy, if you will. So then, of course, we have Brad Wozny's LinkedIn here, which I'm going to try boot up here. It'll just take a second, so just bear with me. But Brad Wozny is the guy who runs the Sovereign Soul show, and his name was also on the document. It says award-winning Canadian screenwriter, entrepreneur, indie film director, and producer. Brad optioned 2 screenplays to an Oscar and Emmy-winning producer at a Hollywood studio, and has received 8 awards nominees for his feature film scripts. They are currently working to get the films into pre-production, along with several other enlightened projects in development. And he's a screenwriter, performer, and assistant director. He's worked on motion pictures and TV shows ranging from Disney, Paramount, Sony Pictures, 20th Century Fox, A&E Network, CBC, Lifetime Media, and Hallmark. Quite an interesting resume considering what he's working on doing. It's like he plays both sides of the narrative right there by working with organizations like Disney or CBC, and then at the same time working with people that are calling out those very same entities, which is funny. So, raised in a diverse Toronto suburb, he poured his Canadian Army service corporate career days from Rim Blackberry, Reiki practitioner energy, shamanic practices, entrepreneurial experience in real estate investments, and building smartphone apps into his writing, placing high in many world-renowned screenplays contests of Hollywood. So, Blackberry, of course, is directly involved in the Convergence. And also, what I will say is that he had a product as well, or has a few products that are involved in the Convergence as well. I mentioned one of them in my prior video where I spoke about Dan. So Brad is involved in that as well. So we have he's the assistant director of the Directors Guild of Canada, and has been a producer, or is a producer of Pura Vida Pictures. And he went to Wilfrid Laurier and was part of the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity or sorority or whatever you want to call that within a university, and then as well was part of the Department of National Defense for 4 years as a soldier. So, and he's volunteered for Canadian Blood Services as well. So, to move forward now, I'm going to start by talking about the Force Alliance Contact. So this website is in French. I have it translated to English here. It says, we are Force Alliance Contact, a group to make the voice of the oppressed heard and to react against abuses of power while reclaiming our freedom. And then, of course, you have the 17th letter, the alphabet Q, right in the center on a compass being held by the eagle. Nous le people, that's we the people in French. So we are Force Alliance Contact, a group determined to make the voices of the oppressed heard and to put an end of the abuse of power. Our mission is clear: to expose organizations that profit from people's distress, especially corrupt political leaders. Our commitment is unwavering. We work closely with countries around the world that share our vision. Together we are developing whistleblowing modules to expose malpractice and injustice. These modules will enable people to report abuse, protect their identity, and contribute to positive change. Join us in our quest for transparency, justice, and fairness. Together we can make a difference. Right. So, and then it goes on to say, it mentions the Force Alliance Contact Team and says, where we go one, we go all. So that's standard QAnon phrase right there. And it says the case arose from a call for help from an Aboriginal tribe in Canada that was being treated so badly that it was endangered. Discovered the story behind this dossier and how a very serious subject initially inflicted on Indigenous peoples will be used to free all peoples who wish to do so from their oppressors. So once again, the term Indigenous is used. So UNDRIP right there. So, and then it says here, just let me move forward, sorry about the confusion. So it was in June 2019 that Normand Pilot's entourage contacted Mr. Steve Trudell, both of those names on that document, to ask for his assistance regarding the elections involving the Innu community of this particular Native community. This turned out to be a colossal file and led Steve Trudell to take on other important matters. It became clear that this issue would ultimately concern all the people of this world and serve to liberate all those who wish to do so from their oppressors. This is why Force Alliance Contact was created. So, and then it says, ask an unconventional army, which has quietly structured itself to intervene, accompany, and protect oppressed and mistreated people with supporting evidence to legitimize their intervention. To achieve this, the people must make the final step of demanding the abolition of the current political structure in each country. How? Gathering evidence from around the world to expose governments by signing a standard document proposed to you so that Force Alliance Contact can pass it on and submit it to the embassies and non-conventional militarized groups concerned. Those who join those who have overcome their fear and already signed the form letter be part of the history of the New World. Sounds like New World Order for one, and for two, this is where things like evolved blockchain come into play to really just digitalize governments and provide the illusion of choice for people. So this right here, this little article here is about Normand Pilot. So just gonna wait for it to translate to English here. It says he wants to bring spirituality back to this community. And before the arrival of large boats centuries ago, we practiced these ceremonies. Says this is Normand Pilot over here. And 55-year-old man refers to the sweat tent. The Metashan, the indigenous ritual, brings people together in a tent or shed in which steam is spread from white hot and then watered stones. In a very intense heat, the participants pray for their healing by the sacred fire. With the arrival of the Allah, sorry, I can't pronounce that, who dispossessed us of our spirituality, our culture, our language, this movement has moved in the prairies towards the Canadian West and in the deserts of the U.S. Our ceremonies have survived there, explains Pilo. For more than 20 years, he's lived in spirituality. He is one of those who organize medicine in the community. However, to achieve this, Innu went to seek teachings from other Aboriginal people through his many trips. So, and so on and so forth. So, just to now go over just some more images here. This is Steve Trudell, who is mentioned, and then he is an organizing member of the National Committee for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. Apparently they've worked for 5 years in the shadows, accumulating evidence of corruption and fraud which has been submitted to international institutions. And then this is Paul Poulin, who is one of the signatories on that document that I showed at the beginning. This is an older photo of him in the military, and then a slightly more current photo. And so he actually has served in the Canadian Armed Forces for 3 years and is a member of Police on Guard for Thee. So, once again, Marcus Ray's plans consisted of ex-military and ex-police. There you have it. So, then to move on, now I'm going to talk a little bit about Norm Traversy. So, Norman Traversy here is a former firefighter, and he as well he worked for the city of Mississauga, and his career started in 1982. And after he was diagnosed with PTSD from suffering injuries at work, he was put to work in the Mississauga Fire Headquarters, and after having trouble with the stairs, he was transferred to work at Mississauga City Hall. So, and basically, he is with this person, which is Amina Motala, who is basically a Bitcoin enthusiast. So, that's who Amina Motala is right there. And that's kind of a brutal picture that I paused it at, but whatever, this ain't no fashion contest. So, in this particular video here, sorry about that. In this particular video here, which is 4 years old, Norman mentions being given a number of a special agent in the FBI and told her to expect several hundred people, that there was a friendly march to ask for help from the U.S. government regarding the corruption in Canada. That march has already happened. The day before, Norm and Mina went to the American Embassy, and the special agent they spoke to knew them by sight, and the march was from Parliament Hill to the American Embassy, and Norman had a red box that was signed by various people, and in that box had a one-page letter to President Trump and the President of Mexico, and a 6.5-page legal brief outlining their issues, which were human trafficking, Justin Trudeau and SNC Lavalin and his corruption, and workplace safety boards and how they were laundering money. So apparently the embassy was fenced off and they placed documents against the fence. And Amina asked if anybody has had the C-19 to let, since that march, to let her know. Right, so endorsing something that wasn't even isolated to begin with. So, and then Norman says that he was contacted by a Dene clan mother who is the matriarch of the tribe. She's there to protect the next 7 generations, as he says. And then he says that the chief is an elected official and is only there for 2 to 3 years, but the clan mother is there for life. And he says a Dene clan mother and a Cree clan mother contacted them, and this lady, she was doing a tobacco ceremony on the shores of Great Slave lake every evening. And after a few conversations, they decided to fly out from Yellowknife to do what he said exactly what we had done, only concerning their matters. The Cree clan mother came with her brother. So, and I will get to who these people are momentarily. Norman said that being locked out of the courtroom was a total obstruction of justice. He and Amina mention a team of lawyers working with them, and he also describes Amina as an organizer and engine behind all this. And then he said, I do as I'm told by Amina. And she says, no, you don't. You're my boss. I call you boss. So, I don't know if that was a slip of Norman Traversy or what. But anyway, in this one over here, in this particular video, Amina mentions common law courts, and Norman mentions they locked me out of a courtroom, held a hearing behind locked doors, and I don't think I've mentioned this before, but I put in two formal judicial review complaints to the courts, to their judicial review board that's supposed to be independent. No reply, no acknowledgement. Don't want to go there, so unless some hotshot lawyers show up, I think we've got to change course and take the common law approach. All Canadians have been trespassed against. We've all been trespassed. Every single one of them. Not just me, not just you. All of us have been trespassed against. So, the clan mothers that are mentioned, like the Cree one and Dene one. So the Dene one is Nolene Villebrun, and the Cree one is Sandra Cunningham Mackenzie. Norman mentioned clan mothers who are Dene, Cree, and two clan mothers at the Clan Mothers Council. So this person, Melanie Purcell, by the way, is also part of the whole document, if you will, who studied practical nursing. So, sorry I skipped over that. And then, so, you have Nolene Villebrun, and then Sandra Cunningham Mackenzie. And I'm not sure who these two people are, but he also mentioned two Algonquin. So, if Nolene even wants to contact me directly, as I know there have been some very minimal communications on Facebook there, she can feel free if she'd like, if she has questions herself, or if she would be open to doing a live stream with me, that would be great too. So, then to move forward here, so what happened as well, there's another video I'll be leaving a link in the description of, but on Rumble, there was an interview where Joseph Bergault, Theo Fleury, and Jamie Sale, which are part of an organization called Canadians for Truth, they interviewed Nolene Villebrun and Sandra Cunningham Mackenzie, and Nolene mentioned that she sat on the finance branch with Tamara Leach, and Sandra Mackenzie's brother is the one who runs Horseback Riders for Freedom. So, then I just want to say here that she is sharing a Peoples of the Salmon document, and it has been shared in different Native groups too. I'm quite surprised to say that Natives are endorsing fake Native groups that support UNDRIP. So, there you have that. And so this is Sandra Mackenzie over here on the right, Sandra Cunningham Mackenzie, I should say. So, and then we'll get to talking about Kellyanne Wolf in a little bit. I just want to show a couple things here about Nolene. So, Nolene Villebrun was part of this climate change, or climate action training, if you will. So, without reading about this whole initiative here, I just want to say that climate change really is the same thing as the biodigital convergence. It's referring to blurring the lines between what's biological and digital. And the circular economy is part of this whole scam, which basically has to do with taking waste, doesn't matter if it's recycling, compost, whatever, and heating it at very high temperatures to create graphene, which is used for twinning the environment into the metaverse, so that you actually have climate change, if you want to call it that, in and of itself. And also it's used as like a battery and part of smart infrastructure in and of itself. So here you have that. And then now to talk just a little bit about Amina Motala and that whole aspect there, as she is tied right into Norman Traversy. We're going to talk about her and Kyle Kemper, who is Justin Trudeau's half-brother. So, I'm going to read very briefly what was on Amina Motala's YouTube channel as a description for herself. She says, 20 years ago, I strategically started a successful commercial mechanical company with my ex-husband. Then on to working with kids and learning disabilities. I live a blessed life. My visionary influencers are my grandmother, mother's side, my father, and my grandfather. Father's side, a South African 60s freedom fighter, raised in a visionary mindset and learned how to critical think. I saw a precarious world looking for solutions. In 2012, I discovered digital assets, waited till 2017, ran a 2.5-year meetup in the cryptocurrency and blockchain space, gathered much info, and build a great network. So there you have that. And she says, I feel we the people. There you have that again. And also as well, I have read an article called Transhuman Crypto Cloud Mines in previous videos, and in that Transhuman Crypto Cloud Mined article, it pretty well says that nodes, which are devices that are used to access the blockchain, are no different than human beings, and human beings and machines are indistinguishable. So therefore what I'm saying is that if human beings and machines are not distinguishable from each other, then you essentially have transhumanism, hence why the article is called Transhuman Crypto Cloud Mines, ran by Melanie Swan of the Blockchain Institute. So I'm just going to read a little bit here while I can, and hopefully this all responds here. But it says here that, so basically Amina has also interviewed General Paul Vallely, as well as Kyle Kemper, which is Justin Trudeau's half-brother. And Kyle Kemper is a technologist, strategist, and futurist, and he's also the half-brother of Justin Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister, and his mother, Margaret Trudeau, married Fred Kemper after divorcing Pierre Trudeau in 1984. So Kyle Kemper is more than the half-brother of Justin Trudeau. He's a firm believer in love, liberty, and honorable value creation. He seeks to bring about positive social change for the betterment of humanity, and since 2013, he's been helping individuals, businesses, and associations and governments understand blockchain and cryptocurrencies. He has more than 15,000 hours of experience in this field and is well respected by his peers around the world. So that is Amina right there, and then you have Kyle Kemper over here. So just to go over Kyle Kemper's resume just a little bit here, is the fact that he is the CSO of Global Blockchain and holds 2 board and advisor roles as Executive Director at Blockchain Association of Canada and ICO Advisor at Data Wallet. So I'm just going to apparently verify I'm human over here. And So he is the executive director of the Blockchain Association of Canada. And so just going to read about the Blockchain Association of Canada ever so briefly. The goal is to encourage the responsible adoption of the blockchain technology by the industry and the government across Canada as a means to create innovation in service of all sectors of the economy. We do create that innovation through different channels and platforms. Right. So then this right here, this is about synthetic biology, which is basically 3D bioprinting in and of itself. So, and of course, in order to, perform aspects that revolve around security, data management, and such, they talk about using the blockchain for synthetic biology. So, you have data management and integrity, intellectual property protection, collaboration and trust, supply chain traceability, decentralized marketplaces, synthetic biology security. Right, so these things are all illusions because, like I mentioned about the transhuman crypto cloud mines, all blockchain products are pretty well daisy-chained to each other. So, because nodes are indistinguishable from human beings to machines. So, here you have it. And then also here, now I'm just going to talk about Kellyanne Wolf ever so briefly, member of the ASMAN, who's also the face of Evolve Blockchain, which is a direct democracy blockchain app that's meant to give the illusion of self-governance. The Web3 technology is just part of the convergence, and the tech team behind it are Richie Marquis, Damian Spalding, and this guy whose real name is Andrew McPherson, who supposedly has a Mensa member. But anyway, the point here is that I have already mentioned those three individuals in prior videos, so I'm just going to leave this by talking about the digital twin, considering Richie Marquis likes the digital version of himself, and also relating this to quantum computing, being that we're talking about QAnon, and the Q in QAnon refers to quantum. Will the digital twin initiatives to better understand the physical world around us get a boost from advancing quantum computing? Note, a digital twin is a virtual model that mirrors a physical object or process through its life cycle, providing a near real-time bridge between the physical and digital worlds. Digital twin technology enables you to remotely monitor and control equipment and systems. The biggest benefit expected from quantum computers is on the ability to perform complex computations, which even the supercomputers of today cannot perform. Qubits are the magic ingredient to deliver the high degree of computational power, and the real-time two-way communication and synchronization between the physical twin and digital twin enables a variety of prognostics and diagnostic opportunities. The digital twin journey typically starts with simulations of critical assets or individual components. The larger goal is to simulate an entire process or a setup, such as a smart city, manufacturing plant, highway network in the virtual world. Classical computers will run out of steam in simulating and postulating millions of variables interacting with each other. This is an area of digital twins to immensely benefit from the quantum computing. Coupled with the processing power of quantum computers, the future digital twins could simulate billions of scenarios in the least time and guide the humans on the most optimal strategy. So, there you have it. I'm just going to now conclude and thank everybody for watching, and people can find me directly on Facebook at Matt Unseated if they have questions for me, or that's what the comment box is for. And also, what we need to do is form ethics committees, educate ourselves on the many aspects of the biodigital convergence, and stand up to not only the politicians, think tanks, and standardization organizations involved, but also the controlled opposition involved, like Kellyanne Wolf, who is pushing the blockchain to what? Combat other blockchain initiatives? Makes no sense. So, also, most importantly, we do have to protect the water. So I would check out findaspring.org to find local natural springs in your area, or just go for a drive or walk and look for yourselves. So, thanks everybody for watching. Check out Allison McDowell. Check out James Scott McKillop and his bookstore Barely Bruised Books. And also check out Josephine LaValle and her lives on Facebook, as well as myself at Matt Unseated. Thanks everybody for watching, and take care.